Hello everybody, this is Lee. I'm not in the lab today. As you can see, I have joined my two favourite 5G nutters, Barrie Trower and Mark Steele, in Barrie Trower's front room. Now, to be fair to Barrie, he didn't know I was coming along today, so he didn't get a chair out for me. So instead, I've had to get my own chair and just sort of slum it as much as I can. But we're going to have a great time seeing what these fantastic guys have got to say about 5G. So sit back in your chair, get a wee tipple, and enjoy the 5G crazy.
You don't interrogate either the science or the technical parameters of 5G. Most people would believe that 5G operates in these higher frequency millimetre waves. Right? It does, but that's only part of it. Its blanket coverage is in the sub-gigahertz range. It's a scanner. And how you can scan higher frequency waveforms are extremely problematic to look through concrete brickwork. Right? What you can see into the urban environment is with a sub-gigahertz frequency. And that's why, when I first got exercised, I thought, cheeky swines, what they're doing is, they're scanning us.
Well, I mean, where do you start with all this? So, when Mark says he got exercised, I'm not sure that's like, like casting out demons or he went for a jog somewhere. But he says that 5G blanket coverage is sub 1 gigahertz. So how come lots of companies with lots of 5G coverage don't have any sub 1 gigahertz spectrum on 5G? Maybe there's a secret. And what's this about it being a scanner? What's it scanning? Is it like scanning police radios or CB? What's it doing? Where do you start? It seems that Mark's already got things pretty confused. Now, I've come to the conclusion, and I think lots of you have as well, that neither Mark nor Barrie have any idea about any of this stuff that they talk about, especially in this video here. Mark thinks he's an expert, and Barrie is supposed to have a PhD in physics. I'm pretty sure that he hasn't. Well, we've only just joined them, so let's see where they go from here.
I picture that antenna. That's the scanner.
Pure fiction.
And when one of the lighting guys threw this at me, that there is a dew. It's a direct energy collimator. Right? It's called a dielectric lens.
Right. Well, I've covered this in lots and lots and lots of videos, which you can see on my channel here. And this has been covered by MC Toon on his channel, which I will link to in the description, and by a great guy, Andrew McNeil, who actually built a real dielectric lens for the same frequency, and you can see it here. And it isn't quite the same as the one Mark has, is it? Because you see, the one Mark has is from a device like this. This is a Harvard engineering thing which goes on top of your lampposts to turn them on and off. And he thinks the little bit of resin stuff at the end of the antenna here inside this plastic box is a directed energy weapon. Right. Okay. Yes. Unless, of course, he means, like, Jewish people by Jew. But I don't think he does he?
The IEEE parameter for 5G, it's an autonomous vehicle.
So, first, it's the IEEE. Now, Mark claims to be a member of the IEEE. If he was, he'd know it's not called the IEEE, it's called the IEEE. A parameter is something that defines something else. So, there are some IEEE articles about 5G and autonomous vehicles, but they're discussion articles. The IEEE is an organisation where engineers and scientists can come together and discuss things. The only people who actually define what 5G is and what's in 5G is the 3GPP. Link below. They control what 5G is, they write the standards. So whilst autonomous vehicles, when they come, if they come, might use 5G, saying it's a defining parameter of 5G is like me saying that YouTube is a defining parameter of 4G. Well, it isn't. YouTube can be used over 4G, or 2G, or 3G, or Wi-Fi, or whatever you want to do, but YouTube doesn't define 4G, and autonomous vehicles don't define 5G. Does Mark even know what these words mean? I have my doubts, but let's carry on, because this could be fun.
Because that's 4G.
4G.
Right? That's inverse square law.
Square law.
That's where when you radiate away from the radiator, you're going to drop off the radiation. Okay. That is a collimated signal. And how you collimate that, specifically, you can use phased array to do that, but that is specifically from those type of antenna designs. And those antenna designs are illegal and unlawful. They have no purpose in a civilian setting, and have only ever been used to target, as Barrie will know, people in buildings, through buildings.
Right, so, I mean, it's getting quite funny now, isn't it? Lots and lots of words that Mark doesn't seem to understand. And it's interesting that Barrie Trower, the PhD expert, hasn't seen fit to interject yet and help Mark with his misunderstanding. So, first, the antenna, as we've seen, it's just not a dielectric lens, because a dielectric lens for that frequency is about that sort of size, and the antenna is not that sort of size. It's quite a bit smaller. And he thinks it's illegal and unlawful. So, under what law would that be, Mark? And how come that Gateshead Council managed to install, what, 35,000 of them with no issues? And please explain how this will target people through buildings. Unless you throw it really, really hard, I suppose. Well, you know, we've only just started, so maybe Mark and Barrie will start to clarify these things a bit later. No, I don't think they will either.
To do it is get a decent spectrometer for the 5G. I mean, you're basically going from sort of a millimetre up to 9 millimetres, really. Get a spectrometer and say, there it is, that is in the 5G range.
So, by spectrometer, Barrie means a spectrum analyzer, a tool which I've used in some of my videos, and a spectrum analyzer will sweep through the frequencies, a bit like, you know, you had on your old-fashioned radio dials from like 88 to 100 and something megahertz. It sweeps through those and draws a graph of the signals that it finds at those frequencies. And they are really good tools, so you can take a spectrum analyzer, put an antenna on top, and you can find out what's transmitting in your local area. Very good. But 1 millimetre to 9 millimetres, well, that's, he's talking about wavelengths there. 9 millimetres is about 33 gigahertz. 1 millimetre is about 300 gigahertz. So he seems to be saying that 5G is running from about 32, 33 gigahertz up to 300 gigahertz. But hang on, Mark already said that 868 megahertz is 5G, and that's its blanket coverage is sub 1 gigahertz. So, I mean, we're only just a few minutes in, and they already can't agree with each other, even though they're sitting there in the same room together. And the spectrum analyzer, well, an analyzer shows you what's out there, but it doesn't define what it is. You can't say, that's 5G and that's 5G, because it shows it on the screen. No, not really. What defines, in the UK anyway, what spectrum is used for is Ofcom. And they license spectrum to users such as, oh, I don't know, mobile phone companies to use for 2G, 3G, 4G, and of course 5G. So maybe a bit later, Barrie and Mark will look at Ofcom and clear all these things up. Maybe.
In 1972, which is the first I can go back
I was even born then.
5G was used as a weapon. It was used for crowd control.
Oh gosh. So, hang on. 5G in 1972? So in 1972, there wasn't even 1G. In fact, there was There was 0 Gs. There was none. None of this existed. And in fact, a lot of the technology used in 5G didn't exist in 1972. I'm not sure about you, but I'm starting to doubt Barrie Trower's credentials here a little bit. Does he actually have any idea what 5G is? Any at all? You see, 5G became an actual thing, a real standard, when 3GPP Release 15, again notes below, was released and standardised and ratified in late 2017. And Barrie thinks that somehow it was used 45 years earlier? No. Look, here is the 3GPP 5G timeline. Do you see it there? Right, so what does it say? No, it hasn't got 1972 on it, has it? In fact, 5G, the process of defining and standardising it, started in 2015. Oh dear, it's not going well, is it? So much for our relaxing evening in with Barrie and Mark. I don't know.
A World Health Organization advisor said stop 5G. Then it was known to kill birds, cattle, tadpoles, insects.
So 5G kills birds, cattle, presumably cows and things, tadpoles and insects. I do wonder where he gets this stuff from.
Californian firefighters, I've had a lot to do with, Californian firefighters have an exemption from 5G. It's the legal bill 649, and the firefighters are exempt 5G because of its complicated dangers to their health.
Well, the problem there, Barrie, is that SB 649 does indeed have a single line that says that small cells, only small cells, shouldn't be installed on fire department property. The proposal, SB 649, doesn't say anything whatsoever about 5G. But the problem is the entire thing, the entire SB 649 proposal was vetoed and never put into law. So, you're wrong again.
UK, I've got the 5G frequencies 28, 38, 60, 72, 73 gigahertz running either edge of those.
So, for UK, 5G frequencies are 28, 38, 60, 72 and 73 gigahertz. Well, the problem is exactly none of those frequency bands have been awarded in the UK for 5G networks. So they're not 5G frequency bands for the UK. But it's strange that Barrie says that those are the 5G bands here, but Mark's already said that the blanket coverage, which is like the whole coverage, is sub 1 gigahertz. So what is it? But it gets worse. Some of those frequency bands aren't actually frequency bands for 5G at all, anywhere in the world. The 5G millimeter wave bands, so-called FR2, frequency range 2, are here in this list. Yes, so between 26 and 40 gigahertz. Well, I suppose Barrie got 2 right, didn't he? 2 out of 5 isn't bad, is it? He's an old guy. Come on, give him a break.
There's a new weapon just been brought out called active denial. Its nickname is the Growler. I know it is just above the 5G range, but it is in the 5G. It's above what they are putting out from the lampposts, but it is still in the 5G range. It's 95 gigahertz.
Okay. So, on all the 5G nutter groups, there's usually a meme, although not so much recently because they've all been told how stupid it is, that the ADS, which is the active denial system, which is a real thing, pictured here, is somehow 5G. Well, you know, the ADS is real, and it does run at 95 gigahertz. But that's not in any 5G range anywhere. And the ADS transmits 100,000 watts of power from a liquid gas-cooled gyrotron in a huge truck, because it is pretty big, isn't it, with a huge antenna on top. And you can see it here. It doesn't look like a 5G base station to me. So I'm not really sure what his point is here. Because, I mean, any comparison between 5G and the ADS is like me comparing this here high energy infrared laser to this little torch here. Yeah, it's not quite the same thing, is it, Barry?
5G has to be compliant because it has to be linked, as it is in other countries. It has to be linked to all radar systems, Wi-Fi, smart meters, hospital equipment. It's going to be in the Internet of Things, so they all have to be compatible with each other.
So, hang on a minute. Let me put my drink down. 5G has to be linked to all of the radar, like the radar at Heathrow Airport, or weather radar. Why, Barry? Why? And linked to all the Wi-Fi and the hospital equipment, because it all has to be compatible. And smart meters. In the UK, there are 2 smart meter contracts. One covers the north of the UK, and one covers the south of the UK. They did that so there's, a bit of fairness and competition, and so that one company doesn't have the whole share of the pie. In the north of the UK, they use a proprietary network supplied by Arqiva at about, I think it's about 460 megahertz or so. In the south of the UK, they use O2's network using, as far as I know, 2G GPRS and maybe a bit of 3G. But that's it. There is 0 5G in smart meters, as far as I know, anywhere in the world, because they just don't need it. What are they doing? They're saying, oh, you use some electric, this much. I'll tell them so they can send you a bill. Yep, and that's it. The only thing 5G does need to be compatible with is its own specification, which is, at the moment, 3GPP release 15, 16, 17, but mainly release 15 because that's what everyone is using right now. And again, you can see the link to this down below in the description. So what is he on about?
So you're not just getting 5G, you're getting all of the other Gs and Wi-Fi all thrown.
Oh. So, not just 5Gs, but we get all of the Gs. It's Pangetopia. So, if there's a 5G cell site, does it also do 2G, 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi? Well, no, of course it doesn't. It does 5G. I've no idea what Barry's on about here. If you do, maybe put a comment in below. But as far as I can see, it's complete and utter nonsense.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the USSR
Born in the USSR.
actually experimented on humans and animals with 5G. They actually carried out experiments in 1977 with 5G.
You are fake news.
So, proper military experiments with 5G in 1977, that's before we had 1G, experiments in what? Time travel, maybe?
5G has to have megahertz frequencies to comply with other transmitters and receivers. Also, it has to have, in other countries, I haven't seen it for this, but I know it has to have it, the low gigahertz frequencies.
Oh, okay. So, hang on. So 5G has to have megahertz. Presumably he means below 1 gigahertz. And in some countries, it has to have low 5G frequencies. Barrie, Ofcom auctioned 2.3 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz, which are low gigahertz frequencies, for 5G in 2018. Did you not actually do any research before this video? So far, Barrie said that 5G is 9mm, which is 30 gigahertz, to 1mm, 300 gigahertz. It's been 28, 38, 60, 72, 73 gigahertz, and now it's sub 1 gigahertz as well, to be compatible. Compatible with what? Why? 5G is completely separate.
And as you'll see there, this is the antenna. And what it actually states there is it's capable of backhauling. Backhauling for laypersons, it means spying.
Okay, let's see what backhauling actually really means. Backhauling, as you can read here, is a term that we use in telecoms, and all it means is taking the data from a base station, like a mobile cell site, back into the rest of the network so we can get to the internet or the phone network to make a phone call, etc. That's what backhauling means. It just means getting data from the edge of the network, like a cell site, into the core of the network. It's got nothing to do with spying, Mark. Nothing whatsoever. It doesn't mean what you think it means at all.
This is Harvard technology, capable backhauling. This is the antenna that was stated that it was for. This was only for switching lights on and off. Well, this is what this antenna is capable of. Smart city services controlling and monitoring such applications. This is from Harvard. As pollution,
Harvard
so it can actually look in the environment, scan its own environment.
No, it doesn't.
Parking, so you can see where your car is. Winter maintenance, you can see how much snow's on the ground. Smart waste, this is where you can interrogate your bin. And flood detection, so you can actually see how much is on the ground, how much water. But this is really interesting because this is a specific technical parameter of 5G,
Another one.
capable of backhauling data from a multitude, as Barrie just mentioned before, multitude of devices in the built-up environment. Leaf Nut Smart City. That is what...
Oh dear.
That is, and that was what was hidden under what looked like a dipole antenna. So the antennas on the LED streetlights in Gateshead, that's what's hidden underneath. Hidden under what looks to a layperson as a dipole antenna. That's 5G. That's a 5G antenna.
Okay. No, Mark, it's not a 5G antenna. And that's not what the antenna is capable of at all. What Mark's done is he's read a list of the kind of smart city applications that Harvard would want to work with. Nowhere does it say that Harvard devices actually do all this stuff. Nowhere at all in that document. So what happens is this device here, not this one actually, but similar ones, they have little sockets on the side, and in that socket you can plug in other devices, such as pollution monitors, or if it's by some sort of water course somewhere, a water level meter, so you can see what the pollution is like and how deep the water is. And that's it. Mark seems to think that this is like some kind of Star Trek tricorder that scans the whole environment and works out what the pollution is and where your bins are and what your car's doing and so what you have for lunch and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't. It's just data, Mark. And it isn't 5G. And we'll see why later. But this is also covered by another one of my videos where I take one of these things to bits and show you what's inside. Because, you know, you can actually buy these on eBay, funnily enough. But in that video, we look at the document that says that to do all these clever things that Mark talks about, you have to buy other things to plug into it. It isn't a tricorder, Mark. This isn't Star Trek.
To try and discredit the fact that we have 5G. As Barry said before, 5G has been here for a significant number of years. 5G, is, as far as I know, fact, was started to be rolled out in Gateshead alone in 2011. 2011, 2012, this equipment came to Gateshead.
Now, so he thinks 5G was being rolled out in 2011, 2012, before 4G. That's right. EE launched their 4G network in 2012. And curiously, in another video just a few days ago, Mark said that 5G was installed in Gateshead in 2016. Let's listen to that, because I happen to have it at hand.
It fitted them before that, but it was 2016 when that 5G network came to my near locality.
Oh dear, Mark. Oh, what a tangled web we weave, when first we practice to deceive.
And what is sub-gigahertz, just for those people who don't understand what that means, and why is it important in relation to...
It's very important because
5G?
this is, it. You know, going back to the deceit
Sub-gigahertz
industry.
is below 1 gigahertz, right?
Below 1 gigahertz.
Right.
The sub-gigs range, right, I knew it to be long-range radar,
Yeah.
right? So when I found out that this transmitter was operated at 868, I was taken aback because obviously we'd all seen the narrative about these higher frequency waveforms, you know, the 30 gigahertz, etc.
Right.
And I thought, that's quite interesting. This is a bit of radar, this is a bit of scanning equipment.
And where do you start? So now, sub 1 gigahertz is long-range radar scanning equipment. So my walkie-talkie here, this one here, this is sub 1 gigahertz. Is it radar? I don't think it is it? No, it's not radar, Mark. It's a walkie-talkie. Just because it's sub 1 gigahertz, that doesn't mean it's radar. Some long-range radar might use sub 1 gigahertz, but that doesn't mean everything sub 1 gigahertz is radar.
What they're saying.
With what we now know to be a class 1 cancer causing
Yeah,
radiation.
absolutely.
So no, it's not class 1 anything. The IARC classified RF as a class 2B carcinogen. That means that it might have some kind of interaction with the human body and maybe cause some DNA damage, and that might lead to cancer at some point. But there's no definitive answer to that. It's a possibility. Do you know what else is a class 2B carcinogen, like RF? Aloe vera and coconut oil. Yes. So, wrong again. And what a lovely emphatic agreement in wrong from Barrie. Stunning.
That 5G, one of its technical parameters is densification. Densification. So it doesn't matter if it operates 2G, 3G, 4G. It's 5G as long as there's a lot more of it.
So hang on, Mark. It doesn't matter if it's 2G, 3G or 4G or whatever. It's 5G if there's more of it. So if there's more 2G, it's 5G. Does he know how stupid he sounds? And the expert Barrie hasn't interjected with any corrections yet, has he? Curious. Maybe he's clueless as well.
It specifically operates in the sub-gigahertz range. 868 is specific for autonomous vehicles.
So It's 5G because it's sub-gigahertz. Even though not long ago Barrie said 5G is 30 gigahertz to 300 gigahertz, but 868 megahertz is specific to autonomous vehicles, but not 5G. So is it 5G or not? No, it isn't, because in the whole of Europe, the spectrum 868 to 869 megahertz is allocated for, and you can see here, non-specific short-range devices. This is from Ofcom. This is the actual people who license and decide what this stuff is for. It isn't 5G. It isn't radar.
The fact that it's got that dielectric lens, which is the absolute...
No, Mark, because it isn't a dielectric lens. We already know this. You kind of need some new material now, Mark. It's getting a bit boring, this dielectric lens stuff.
Which is the absolute technical parameter of the collimated signal. You can only get a collimated signal either by a phased array signal or by that collimator. That collimator is specific to 5G.
That collimator, presumably he means the little blob of resin on the end of here, which I'll cover in a different video, which he thinks is a dielectric lens. Specific to 5G? Well, no, it isn't. You see, Mark, I've read the 5G standards documents, all of them, and you can all read it as well. You know where the link is. And the word collimated appears precisely nowhere in any of the 5G specification documents that I can find. Where does Mark get this from? Who knows? Well, nobody except Mark, because Mark never cites his sources. He just sort of makes it all up and hopes you believe him. If you know where Mark gets this from, please comment down below, because I'd love to know.
So I have the specification of backhauling, densification, the emission, the part of the spectrum, and the dielectric lens. Four specific parts of 5G from the technical parameters. Now, you know, any one of them, as Barrie said before, are 5G, by the way, any one of them, we have four indicated.
Do you want a load of rubbish?
So, backhaul, densification, the part of the spectrum, and the dielectric lens. You have all four in Gateshead. The problem is, Mark, you haven't got any of those. Not in the way you think it is, anyway. And all these things, Mark, they don't actually mean what you think they mean at all. Because so far, backhaul means spying, and it means getting data. It just seems like he hasn't got a clue.
And we have some organisation who the industry have now using or still using to discredit me and discredit the fact that we have 5G and stating that 5G isn't here yet.
What an idiot.
Yeah, so still Mark thinks his 5G rollout happened in Gateshead in 2011, so before 4G and before 5G was even thought of. I think, Mark, that you've kind of discredited yourself here already, multiple times.
Death rates at a 50-year high, as Barrie said before, murder. Because that's what that is.
Yeah, it's murder.
That's what's happening today in the West.
Yeah, only Mark, death rates have actually been falling. So I'm not entirely sure where Mark gets this strange graph from, because look at the graph here. UK death rates are not rising. Yeah.
He's about to do something stupid.
On this was written in 64 BC by Ptolemy.
Ptolemy was born in about 85 AD. Okay, let's see where he goes with this.
Who used radiation behind a heated up metal and various minerals behind a wooden wheel, solid wheel, and he drilled holes and he just spun the wheel and you got the pulses coming through to the eyes. 64 BC, and it was a party game then. Although he was a serious scientist, he was a a Greek living in Egypt. And he found that certain frequencies would cause epileptic fits, photoelectric epilepsy.
So, Ptolemy was born, as I said earlier, in 85 AD. He was possibly ethnic Greek, but he was certainly a Roman citizen, and he did live in Alexandria, just not then. Now, Ptolemy is famous because he was a mathematician and an astronomer and a scientist, and he wrote a couple of interesting treatises. One was called Optics and the other was called Harmonics. But the only reference in either of those to what Barrie says, and I have read both of them, they have been translated from the Greek, although I did read some in Greek as well. The only reference of either of those to what Barrie says is he made a spinning wheel which people looked at sunlight through. No mention of, what was that, heated discs and radiation and crystals and minerals, epilepsy. No. None of that whatsoever. So, is Barrie just making this up as he goes along? Now, if you happen to know a bit more about Ptolemy and some of the work he did in this area, then please let us know in the comments below. But what I have done is, just to start you off to look at Ptolemy and his work, I've put a link to the famous scientist website down below, and you can have a read about Ptolemy and some of his work, and you can even have a look around, find the translated versions of his work and some of his writings, and read it for yourself, and find out what Ptolemy really did, because actually it's pretty interesting stuff.
Other frequencies would make people feel sick, collapse, go mad, and it was a party game.
That might explain
it's
it.
Still
Barrie.
being used today. There are now a list of 750-ish frequencies. They have absolutely no idea of the pulse frequencies they are putting in, because when you start mixing these waves.
Now, hang on. So it was a party game. I think Ptolemy's best party game would be time travel from 64 AD. But it's all irrelevant anyway, because Barrie's talking about flashing lights and photosensitive epilepsy, which is a real thing. You can pulse lights at certain frequencies, and that can trigger epileptic fits. But this is about radio signals and radio frequencies. And a list of 700 frequencies of what? Of light pulses or of radio frequencies? Yeah, so I think again, everything's getting mixed up here. So now we're mixing up flashing lights and radio and RF. But they're not the same. And he says we have no idea of the pulse frequencies we're putting in because they all get mixed up. Well, they do kind of get all mixed up. But actually, they, whoever they are, for one, if you wanted to, you could go out with your spectrum analyzer and you could measure it and find out exactly what's happening. And the next thing is that most mobile phone transmitters on base stations are actually synchronized via very accurate clock sources. And they do this so that they all transmit at the same time to avoid interference issues, so they don't interfere with each other by transmitting at different times, and you could have one transmit when another receives, because that wouldn't work very well if it's TDD signals. So yeah, again, it's just bizarre.
The moment they go up, and people don't know this, they come under the Official Secrets Act.
No, they don't come under the Official Secrets Act when they go up at all. They may be commercially sensitive, and they are, of course, and kept out of the public domain because, well, if you could get a list of where they all are, some idiots might go and try and burn them down. But since it's fairly obvious where they are anyway, because, they're quite big, what's a secret? Now, what is true is that the locations of all the sites, like, if you had a big list of it, is exempt under Section 39 of the Freedom of Information Act. So, if you request that data, then there's no obligation to give it to you under the FOI Act. And Section 12(5)(a) of the Environmental Information Regulations Act 2004 also classes such information to be exempt from release. And this is, of course, indeed for national security, because mobile networks are actually part of our critical national infrastructure. They're used by the emergency services, credit card machines, burglar alarms, all sorts of things use mobile networks. And so they're a target for, well, nutters who might burn them down. So they don't want everyone to have a list of where they all are, because stupid people might do stupid things. But it's not an official secret, Barry.
Once it's up, it's under the Official Secrets Act. MPs sign the Official Secrets Act. They cannot do anything to take them down.
Okay, so this is the last bit now, and it's the last bit of utter nonsense. Now, you'd think that Barry and Mark, considering they both claim that they worked on secret things and signed the Official Secrets Act, would know that you don't actually need to sign the Official Secrets Act to be bound by it. That's right. If you are a British citizen, you are automatically bound by the Official Secrets Act. MPs don't need to sign the Official Secrets Act because they're already bound by it. They might be reminded that they're bound by the Official Secrets Act, and they might be given a document saying, don't forget that if you hear secret stuff, you're bound by the Official Secrets Act. And they might say, oh, yeah, I understand that. But nobody signs the Official Secrets Act because it's an act of Parliament, and it already includes everybody. It includes, well, civil servants, government ministers, members of the armed forces, and the police. But what's interesting is that those people, that is, ministers, civil servants, members of the armed forces and police, can only be convicted of an offence under the Act if the unauthorised disclosure of information is considered actually damaging. And of course, MPs can do things about masts if they want to, because look at this. MP leads protests against phone masts, because that's what MPs do. They support their local constituents. So again, Mark and Barrie are talking complete and utter codswallop. And where do they get it from? Who knows? I hope you've enjoyed an evening in with our two favourite 5G nutters, Mark Steele and Barrie Trower. If you want to hear or see or read a bit more about these two guys, look in the description below, because there's quite a few links that go into some information about their backgrounds, which isn't all they seem to say it is. It's interesting, which might be why they talk such crap all the time about all of this kind of stuff. Hope you had fun. Please, if you want to, subscribe below, because I'll do these videos every now and again, maybe once a week or so, and if you subscribe, it helps me know that you're listening and watching them, and it helps you to know when new ones pop up. And please like and comment, especially comment, because it's really good fun having a chat about all these things down below, and it's great to get your input into the kind of things that we should look at next. In the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed our evening in with Barrie and Mark, had a nice drink, and have a great week.